Do you ever feel like your dom's slipping away, like they're not as confident, motivated, or present as they used to be? Maybe you're thinking, isn't it supposed to be the sub that needs the support? Well, here's the thing. Dominance can drop too, and it's more common than you might think. I'm Alessandra from Dom Sub Living, and today we're diving into the real truth about dom drop, what it is, why it happens, and how you can support your dominant through it. Stick with me because the way you respond could change everything. Welcome to the Dom Sub Living podcast. Now, before we begin, if you want ideas on how to help your dom succeed in their role, grab my How to Be a Good Dom master list at domsubliving.com/dom. It's packed with actionable tips and strategies for building confidence and motivation in any DS dynamic, and you can grab it for free at domsubliving.com/dom. But today you're going to learn what is dom drop, what signs you should look out for, and how you can support your dom without sacrificing your own needs. And this topic matters so much because dom drop isn't talked about enough. We hear a lot about sub drop, but not enough about dom drop, and it's kind of ignored. And when that happens, it can really erode even the strongest DS dynamic. But with the right approach, you can support your dom and keep the connection alive. So first up, what is dom drop? Well, let's explain it in really simple terms. So dom drop is kind of two things actually, but it's an emotional or mental crash that a dominant can experience either after a scene, or the second way is when life kind of just gets too overwhelming and they struggle to stay in their role. And just like sub drop, dom drop is real, but it can look a little different too. And also too, depending on what gender the dom is. But doms may not show their vulnerability. They may not, show that outwardly, and that can make it a little harder to spot. And there are a lot of misconceptions about dom drop because a lot of people will feel, aren't doms supposed to have it all together? Aren't they supposed to be the ones taking the lead? But being in control doesn't mean that they're immune to burnout or self-doubt. And my dom is not immune to this either. After one intense scene we had, my dom actually became really quiet for a few days, and I thought I had done something wrong, but in reality, he was wrestling with the fact that he didn't feel like he had been a perfect dom in that moment, and so we were able to work through that together. So we talked about what dom drop is. So what are the signs your dominant might be experiencing dom drop? So first of all, there might be signs in their behavior that you want to watch out for. So do they withdraw or become emotionally distant? Do they avoid scenes or put them off or delay them? Are they getting irritable or frustrated at small things? Maybe they lose interest in different rituals and protocols or just even the dynamic itself. Because maybe you've found yourself even thinking, why isn't my dom initiating anymore? Especially if they were always taking the lead in the past. It's easy to take it personally as a sub, but sometimes it has nothing to do with you. But we're human, and there was even times when my dom, maybe he didn't seem interested in doing scenes, and so I thought it was because there was something about me. Maybe I wasn't being a good sub or I wasn't attractive enough, but it was really about the pressure that he was putting on himself to perform perfectly. So on top of behavioral signs, there's also emotional signs you want to look for too. So this can be things like self-doubt or perfectionism. Maybe they're saying things like, I'm not good enough at this, or I'm not a good dom. They may have anxiety about failing the relationship or you as a submissive. They could be feeling overwhelmed by responsibility. So there's a lot of these emotional signs that you may be seeing. And there's physical signs too. So things like fatigue, burnout, insomnia. So maybe they're not sleeping good. They could be having just physical aches and pains, headaches, or just even a lack of energy. So now that we know the different signs of dom drop, what really causes it? Well, one of the biggest ones is emotional burnout or just fatigue because they are taking on the role of both a caregiver and a leader. And that can really just leave them emotionally drained, especially if they aren't receiving support in return. So ask yourself, if your Dom is always taking care of you, who's taking care of them? And I know in the case of my Dom, we had to address that too. So he was constantly taking care of me, being the caregiver, being pretty much my life coach. And so he had to get his own coaching too, so that way he didn't get burned out as well. But another cause of Dom drop is just this sense of perfectionism and unrealistic expectations. Because Doms often feel like they need to get everything right, and that when things don't go perfectly, they can sometimes spiral into self doubt. And the media isn't making this easier for them, too, especially with 50 Shades of Grey. A lot of dominants have this ideal of Christian Grey that they think they have to live up to, and that is just totally untrue. And then another cause is external stressors. So things that don't even have to do with the dynamic. So things like work stress, health issues, personal challenges, these can all sneak into the dynamic and leave your Dom feeling like they're failing both inside and outside of the dynamic. And then another cause of Dom drop is that they're not getting aftercare after a scene because Doms need aftercare too, but it's often overlooked because they're paying so much attention to the sub and the sub is needing so much too. But when Doms don't get that emotional recharge, they can really start to feel disconnected and abandoned. So we talked about what causes Dom drop, but how do you support your dominant when they're going through it? Well, the first thing is to recognize the signs early because when you start to notice changes, you can approach the situation with curiosity instead of criticism. So, this is why knowing your dominant is so important. So, you want to ask yourself, is this really about me or is maybe my Dom struggling? And I have to remind myself of this too. There was one time a couple weeks ago, I actually noticed my Dom was starting to seem a little distant. So instead of asking, why aren't you initiating things, I really had to stop and ask him, how are you feeling? Is everything okay? Is there something going on? So we don't want to jump to conclusions. And then the second way to support your Dom when they're going through this is just to offer reassurance without pressure. So tell your Dom that it's okay to feel off sometimes because your support will show them that they don't have to be on all the time. So one thing I like to tell my Dom when he's kind of experiencing a little Dom drop is to tell him, I love serving you and being your submissive, whether you feel up for it today or not, because that little reassurance just kind of can lift a huge weight from their shoulders. And then the third way to support your Dom if they're experiencing Dom drop is just to provide aftercare for your Dom. So ask your dominant what they need for aftercare because everyone is different. Everyone is an individual. It could be a quiet moment, or maybe they need a massage or a favorite meal too. For us, after an intense scene, usually my Dom likes to shower together. So that's one way that we can have aftercare because it really just helps him reconnect without either of us really needing to talk or use words. And we can just focus on being together in a really intimate setting and, showing him that I am still there. I still support him. And so that is one way that we have been able to implement aftercare. And then the fourth way to support your Dom if they're experiencing Dom drop is to have check-ins outside of scene time. So your BDSM dynamic is only part of your relationship. So you want to ask your Dom how they're doing, during the day-to-day stuff and not just, all about scenes, but see if there's any burdens they're carrying, any way you can make their life easier. You can ask for suggestions on how to serve them better, but just really have those check-ins. And we love to do our check-ins on Sunday once a week, and that is just a great time where I can be proactive and ask him if there's any way I can make his life easier. And then the fifth way to support your Dom if they're experiencing Dom drop is just to really encourage them to take time for rest and recharging, maybe even engaging in a hobby. And that way, giving them that little space and breathing room can help them come back to the dynamic even stronger. And it gives them a chance to really just slow down and be present. So we talked about how to support your Dom during drop. Well, let's talk about some of the mistakes to avoid when supporting your Dom. I mentioned this one before, but don't take it personally because it is easy to assume that you are the cause of their drop, but Dom drop is more about what's going on for them inside. And then another mistake I see some of my students make is pushing for immediate solution. So it's going to take time for the dominant to process their feelings, and they have to do it at their own pace. So don't rush it, don't push it. And then subs. The other mistake I see is when subs neglect their own needs. Because yes, you want to support your Dom, but that doesn't mean sacrificing your well-being. That'll actually make it harder for your Dom because you want to keep your own self-care practices strong so that way you can show up fully for them and they don't feel like they're neglecting taking care of you and they have to help you with all your self-care. So take it upon yourself to really focus on your self-care too, so that way you can show up as your best ideal self and serve your dominant. Because I'll give you an example of this that I actually saw with one of the students I was coaching. They are a sub and they were starting to put their Dom's needs above their own. And she ended up actually feeling kind of resentful against her Dom. But with some coaching, I was able to help guide her on how to balance both care for both herself and her Dom. And it's kind of like that illustration of the oxygen mask that if you're on an airplane going down and the oxygen masks come down, you want to put your oxygen mask on first before you help your friend or family member put on their oxygen mask. You have to take care of yourself first, or you won't be able to take care of others. And that goes for a submissive helping to take care of their Dom as well. So we talked about the mistakes you do not want to make, but now how do you rebuild your dynamic after the Dom has experienced drop? So let's say they successfully got through it. So what do you do now? Well, you want to set small, achievable goals. So start with maybe some simple protocols to kind of ease back into your regular dynamic. And it can be something as small as a daily check-in. And you want to celebrate small wins too. This can go a long way with helping to build the dominant self-esteem. So even just small moments of connection and acknowledgement can really just help progress the dynamic. And it just really shows how much you appreciate them. And then you can also create new rituals and protocols too. So use this time to really reflect on what you both need moving forward. Maybe it's new aftercare rituals or just revisiting old protocols, but this is a great time to put something fresh into your dynamic. And one of the easiest things I tell my students over and over when they're going through a tough period in their dynamic is just to introduce a simple good morning and good night protocol if you haven't done that already. It can really help to connect you both, especially when the Dom has been overwhelmed in the past and has just recovered from drop. And if you're stuck coming up with ideas for different rituals and protocols you can use in your dynamic, you can actually grab a whole list of ones that I have at domsubliving.com/protocols. It'll really help get you started there. But don't be afraid to go back and revisit basic protocols that you maybe had in the past or create new ones, because that's really the beauty of a DS dynamic, that it's constantly evolving and changing. But I just want to assure you that Dom drop is real, and it's okay if your dominant feels off sometimes. Your support can make a huge difference in helping them reconnect with their role. So, what's been your experience with Dom drop? Leave a comment. I'd love to hear how you've supported your Dom, or if you're a Dom, what type of support helps you the most. And remember, if you want more ideas on how to help your Dom succeed in the role, grab my How to Be a Good Dom master list. It's packed with actionable tips and strategies for building confidence and motivation in any DS dynamic. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss future content. And until next time, keep embracing your power and pleasure through Dom Sub Living.